Welcome to this video. In this video, I would like to give you tips and tricks for the transaction codes in SAP ERP and SAP S/4HANA. Enjoy this video and let's get started. In the data browser, in the transaction code SE16N, there you can get an overview of all the existing transaction codes in the SAP system with the table TSTC and the text table TSTCT. And in here, for example, if you execute the selection, now I have limited it to 500 entries, there you see all the existing transaction codes in the SAP system. If you want to, you can delete the maximum number of hits. Be careful, this is quite time consuming, but this is how you can identify and search for all the existing transaction codes. So for example, you can also use TSTCT, a text table, type in for the ISO code EN for English, and then, for example, for a text, so for example, for purchase order with the asterisk in front and behind, and then you can hit the selection. There you will get all the transaction codes that have this specific search term in the transaction text. If you want to know how many transaction codes are currently in the SAP system, then once again you can set the table TSTC and then click on number of entries, or you could also hit the F7 key on your keyboard, and then currently you get the number of entries found. And for this one, there are almost 150,000 transaction codes and transactions in the SAP system. In the transaction SE93, there you can maintain transactions and transaction codes. And in here, you basically have to type in your transaction code, and you can click on display, or if you want to, you can change the transaction code also with the change button. If you want to, you can execute this transaction code, you can do a where use list, you can delete the transaction code, you can create a new transaction code based on an existing one, so you copy it, and so on. And as seen in the previous shown tip with the table TSTC and the TSTCT table, there in this input field transaction code, there you can also use the F4 help with this loop button or your F4 key on your keyboard to search for existing transaction codes in the system. So basically, I can click in here, then we're seeing the last objects selected. I can click on information system or hit the F5 key on my keyboard, and here I can search for the transaction codes in the system. Here, for example, I can search for all the transactions starting with MI, then a plus and an O. So basically, the plus is a search character for universal character. So this is how you can use this. You can also do an asterisk, so multiple characters, but this is just for one several character with a short description. They can specify the transaction text. As seen, for example, I can type in also purchase order with asterisk in front and behind. And if you want to, you can also search for a specific package, for an application component. And in here, you can limit your search if you want to. And with this execute button or the enter key on your keyboard, there you can start the search, and now we're seeing all the transaction codes with your specific search term. As seen, I want to show you how you can identify and analyze existing transaction codes. So you can type in your transaction code, click on display, and now you're seeing what kind of program is executed when you type in this transaction code in the command field. I highly recommend to set up a start transaction. So basically, after you have logged in into your SAP system, the SAP Easy Access menu is shown, and there you can move to another transaction when you type in the transaction code. So, for example, the MyGo, and once you've typed this in there, the transaction is opened and you can start working. You can move to another transaction with the prefix /n, for example, to the data browser, and there you can continue working and do another task. And so basically with a start transaction, this start transaction will be started after you have logged in into your SAP system. So this is quite useful if you start working with one specific transaction code, and for sure, I think that's obvious as shown, you can move to another transaction with the prefix /n. You can set up a start transaction in the menu function extras and then set start transaction, or you could also use the key combination Shift and F7. And in here, there you can type in your transaction code. So maybe as shown the MyGo, and with this continue button there, this transaction MyGo has been set as a start transaction. You can change the start transaction once again under extras, set start transaction, for example, to SE16N. And then this has been changed to the SE16N. If you want to, you can delete it and reset it again under extras, set start transaction. There you can delete it and then click on this button, and then the definition of a start transaction has been reset. And an even better tip for the start transaction is using the SAP GUI shortcut. And with the SAP GUI short, there you can also set up a start transaction and log in into the SAP system easily. And you can set up a start transaction with this button generates shortcut. Then this pop-up will occur where you can set up your title. So for example, I set it up to SAP Easy Access and then MyGo, and there you can select between three different types: a transaction, a system command, and a report. I will select transaction. And in here you type in the executed transaction code. So in my case, it's MyGo. Keep in mind that, for example, if you want to start a transaction code with a namespace, so starting with a slash, then you don't have to put the /n prefix in front. You can directly type in your transaction code. So for example, /UI2/FLP for starting the SAP Fiori Launchpad. But in my case, as shown, I would like to call the MyGo. And the system description, there you can specify your system available in the SAP logon, and in here you can specify the SAP client, your pre-filled SAP user, and your language. You can't change, unfortunately, the client and the language, but you can change your SAP user. So this is just a default value. And the location is the location where this SAP GUI shortcut will be created and is ready for being used. So once I've clicked on finish, my SAP GUI shortcut is created. And now I'm logging off from the SAP system to show you what I am meaning. So here we right now see the SAP GUI shortcut with the defined title in it, and with double click a SAP GUI security pop-up will occur. So basically the system is not trying to execute a command to start the transaction in the SAP system. And for this you can select the checkbox remember my decision and click on the allow button. And now a pop-up will occur for logging in into the SAP system. And once again, here you can change your SAP user. So basically now you just type in your SAP password and then you're logged in into the SAP system, and directly this transaction will be started. As seen, now the MyGo has been started. This is really useful. You can set up multiple SAP GUI shortcuts for different transactions. A general hint: if you are logged in into the SAP system and then you double click on this SAP GUI shortcut, then basically just this transaction will be started. So for now, I'm moving over to the SAP Easy Access menu. I double click on this, and now the MyGo, the transaction, is being started. Here we are right now in the SAP Easy Access menu, and for example, if I open up different folders and notes, for example, the Office, then we are seeing that in front of this description, the transaction code is listed in this note. So for example, for this case, the SBWP for the SAP Business Workplace. If I double click on this entry, then this transaction code is started. I can go back with this button, and to display this transaction code in the notes, you have to activate a specific setting under extras and settings, or you can open up the settings also with the key combination Shift and F9, and then you have to select the setting display technical names. So for example, if I would deselect this, set it to inactive, then you will directly see that the transaction code is no longer listed in this node, and with extras, settings, and this checkbox, I can display it once again. So this is really useful. I highly recommend to set this up. And with the search term search underscore SAP underscore menu, you have the ability to search within this menu. So you don't have to open up different nodes and search manually on your own. You can directly use the search SAP menu, search them in the command field. And for example, here I want to show all the nodes that contain invoice in their description. I hit enter, and now I'm seeing all the nodes, all the transaction codes for this search term. If you're using Control Y and then select over your transaction code, and then you're using Control C and then Control V in the command field, there you can copy and paste this transaction code quite easily. And for example, if you want to, you can write it down and use it later on. So here we are right now seeing the default area menu, the S000. And in here there are different transactions grouped to different folders. For example, under Office, there you will see all the transaction codes linked to Office tasks. And this is quite useful. For example, if we want to get to know new transaction codes based on a different area, and you can use another area menu in the command field, and there you can type in the ID of the area menu. So for example, if you type in WEDI and hit the enter key on your keyboard, then directly you now see the area menu for the IDOC and EDI extraction, and here you can open up different folders and get a nice overview of all the related transaction codes for this specific area. And in the transaction SE43N, you can maintain existing area menus or can create a new one. So this is really useful. You can open this up, and within here you can use the F4 help to search for different area menus. So for example, if you would like to know other area menus based on IDOC processing, then you just can type in IDOC with some wildcard search. Keep in mind that this is case sensitive, so maybe you have to use it with a capital letter D, and then we're using execute, and now you're seeing all the area menus that contain IDOC in the text. And for example, here we have a different area menu, the BALT. And once I'm going back and type in BALT in the command field, then now I'm seeing all the transaction codes related to IDOC ALE test environment. And in your user profile, for example, in the SU3 or under system, user profile and user data, there you can set your default area menu under defaults tab and in the start menu. And for example, here you can type in WEDI, save your changes, and now if you're opening up the SAP menu, then now we're seeing that this area menu is your default area menu and will be shown every time now you're starting the start menu, the SAP Easy Access menu after you're logging in, for example. If you want to, you can change it back in the SU3 under defaults, and there you can erase it. And if you want to, but this is a default value, you can also set it to S000. But this is not needed because it will automatically be set because it's the default value. But if you want to, you can open up the SE 43N once again, and for example, create an area menu on your own. And for this one, I'm typing in set underscore ERP underscore up. Click on this create area menu button, or you could also use the F5 key on your keyboard. Now you can type in a little description. So for example, ERP up, click on create area menu. And here basically you have important buttons, but the most important ones are this: to add an entry as subnode, also executable with the key combination Shift and F7, or you can add an entry at same level, also executable with the key combination Shift and F8. Because here we are on the root, there we have to add an entry as a subnode. And now you have the ability to create folders. So for example, here you can type in folder 1, folder 2, hit the enter key. Now you see based on the icon that this type is a folder. There you can insert the entries. Now you have two folders. And here, for example, as an entry, as a subnode, you can now add the transaction codes if you want to. So for example, here, the Miro. Keep in mind that this is just the shown text. And here there's the 16N. If you want to, you can also type in data browser, but here it's important that you type in the transaction code. So for example, Miro and SE16N. Hit the enter key on my keyboard, and then now we're seeing that this is an executable transaction. And if you want to, you can also link to a different area menu, and with this you can reference to another area menu as explained. If you want to, you can also add a report, change a report. After selecting, there you can delete a row if you want to. And with this insert entries button or F5 key on your keyboard, there you can insert this transaction. So this is really nice way that you can use to create an own area menu. And with this save button or Control S key combination, you can save it and create it. Now here you have to select your package, and now I'm just using my temporarily package. If you want, you can align with the SAP basis your development department to link it to a specific package, and then link it to a transport to transport it to the quality and to the productive system. And then we can click on the save button, or you can also hit the enter key on your keyboard. And now this has been saved and is now ready for being used. So once we're going back, and here we are typing set ERP underscore up in the command field, and then we're directly seeing that now the application ERP up is started. So and now we're seeing this area menu. The folder 2 is not shown because it has no content. If we open up this folder, then the two transactions are shown with the enter description. If you want to, you can set this area menu up in the defaults tab in your user profile, so that every time you're logging into the SAP system, this area menu is shown. So here we are seeing the favorites folder, and with the favorites folder, with your right mouse click there, you can use different operations, and here you can, for example, insert a transaction. So for example, the data browser, the SE16. Keep in mind that if you have a transaction code with a specific namespace starting with a slash, you don't have to put the /n prefix in front. You can directly type in your transaction code without /n. And here we have a transaction code for starting the SAP Fiori Launchpad /UA2/FLP. So for example, with the continue button or the enter key, there you can create this favorite, and with double click, you can open this transaction up. And with add other objects, and for example, web address or file, there you can type in a specific text and web address that you want to execute after you double click on this favorite. So for example, my German speaking SAP blog, it's https erp-up.de. And now you have also created this URL. And For creating favorites, you can also use the menu function favorites, because there you have more options. Basically, you can download it to a PC and upload it from a PC. And for example, you can directly create a favorite out of a transaction without using the right mouse click on top of the favorites folder or the menu functions. So to show you this, I open up a new transaction, the FBL1N. It's a transaction for displaying vendor line items, and in here you can using a nice shortcut, and it's the percent underscore GCADDF. So once again, percent underscore GCADDF. And after you hit the enter key, now nothing happened, but in background this transaction has been added to your favorites folder. So to show you this, I'm moving one step back to the SAP Easy Access menu, and here we are seeing that this transaction has been created as a favorite. And another quite useful tip is the system information area and the bottom right area of your SAP GUI. Now it is hidden, but after you have clicked on this white triangle, there you can open the system information. And now down here, you are seeing the executed and running transaction. And if this is for you not the case, then you can click on this dark triangle in the right area of the shown information, and there you can click on transaction. If you want to, you can also display other information, so for example the client, the user, program, and so on. But after clicking on transaction, then this information will be shown down here. And for example, if I'm moving over to the data browser SE16N, if I'm moving to the MyGo, or for example to another transaction, here in the bottom right area, always the current transaction code is displayed, and this is really useful for your daily work with the SAP system. In the data browser, there you can get to know the contiguous transaction codes in a specific database table, and the database table TADIR. It's a table for saving data for the repository object. So open up in the command field the transaction SE16, SE16N, or SE16H. Currently, the transaction code SE16N has been executed, and this table TADIR is shown. And in here you have different columns for the repository objects, and in the object type there you can type in TRAN, stands for transaction. If you're using the for help, then you can get to know the other different objects. But contiguous transaction codes can be identified with this object type, and under object name, there you have to type in your specific transaction code. So for example, the MyRo, and then you have to execute the selection here, and then you get to know the package. And in this case, it's the MRM package. And normally, not for every transaction code, but normally all the contiguous transaction codes are grouped and saved in one specific package. So here you get to know the package MRM for the Miro. Then you can click in this cell using Control C on your keyboard to copy it, then moving one step back, then delete the object name in here, and then under package you paste in your copied package, and then once again you run the selection with object type tran to get to know all the contiguous transaction codes for the Myron. Then you execute this selection, and here you're getting under object name all the contiguous transaction codes. The transaction code SPRO is one of the most important transactions in the whole SAP system, because in here you have the ability to customize your SAP system on your needs. So basically, if you click on SAP reference image or hit the F5 key on your keyboard, there you're seeing a nice tree structure of all the customizing nodes in the SAP system. And basically, how can we display the transaction code in one of the nodes? So for example, if I open up SAP NetWeaver and then, for example, SAP Gateway and then data channel configuration, and then here we see activate or deactivate the SAP Gateway, we can click on this icon to start this node, to start these transactions. But you can also show the technical information under additional information, and then once again additional information, and then display key, and then image activity. And now here we see the image activity, the additional information, and once you've clicked on this using Control C, then you have copied this transaction code, and for example with Control V, there you can paste it in and then execute this transaction code. But for example, if we open up a new node, for example the financial accounting new, then this one, so for example here we see that an additional information is shown. I set the focus, use Control C to copy it, and then if I would use Control V to paste it in, then we see that this transaction does not exist. So how do we identify, based on this description, the transaction code? And to identify this, we have to open up the data browser. So we open up the transaction code SE16N in another window, and there you have to use the table CUS underscore IMGACH for image activities. And under image activity, there you paste your additional information in, and then you execute the search. And then under transaction code, here you see the related transaction code. And if you set the focus in the cell, use Control C to copy it. There you can also open up this transaction code in the command field. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you have learned a lot about transaction codes. Hit the like button, add a comment, and subscribe for free, and then see you in the next video.